And here we go.
Who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Hi, I'm Gail Rubenstein, the founder and CEO of a company called Retail Resilient, social selling for the car industry. And we help auto dealers, auto agencies, and vendors in the auto industry sell more cars, service more cars, and make more money using our social selling strategy. That includes TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and anything else you can think of. So if you're looking to invest thousands and make millions, we're definitely the social selling company for you. Like I said, who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks?
If you run a service drive, you know these days first impressions matter. But when your advisors are tied up with inbound phone calls, they tend to neglect their other, more important duties. And did you know 75% of all service calls are frequently asked questions and routine requests? Still, the average dealer misses up to 30% of inbound calls, adding up to a ton of missed service opportunity and increased customer churn. 68% of callers actually go elsewhere if they can't get through, which means you could be losing $60,000 to $70,000 every month in service revenue simply from missing calls. So who will pick up? Introducing Brooke.
Hi there.
Your best service scheduling assistant. Brooke is the first intelligent digital voice assistant to answer, handle, and appoint all of your inbound service calls. And talking to Brooke is like talking to a friend with human-level understanding in a friendly conversational voice. Her conversational intelligence is built on millions of actual service industry conversations. Book with Brooke today. Visit Brooke.ai or call 866-942-1236. Finally, the perfect match.
See that light above the bathroom door over there? That's a big time saver for our technicians and other recon staff. The light goes on when the bathroom is occupied. Now techs keep working until the light goes out. Then they know for sure the room is empty. Too often, the search for the right product brings valuable time. This inexpensive detailer's cart organizes supplies. Now techs lay their hands on what they need without delay. We got these time savers from Rapid Recon, the reconditioning software company that's always defining better reconditioning solutions for dealerships like yours. When the goal is to get cars through recon in 72 hours or less, every step, every minute, every better decision made helps towards that goal. For more recon efficiency ideas like these, talk to the recon experts at rapidrecon.com.
Larry Feldman is probably the most amazing trainer that I've ever experienced in this business. I've been in the car business now for 35 years, and I've seen quite a few trainers. A lot of them are pretty good. I mean, really, I get something out of all of them that I've seen, really. But Larry is in another class. I really mean that. His training is literally riveting. A little while back, I sat in on his first training that I ever sat in on. It was for new hires. I still remember. I'll never forget it. About 25 people in the room who had never sold cars before. And after 2 hours, I raised my hand. Larry stopped what he was doing and said, yes. And I said, maybe we should take a break. And literally, I'll never forget it. All 25 people turned around, looked at me, and went, well, okay. And he kept going for another 2 hours. Since then, I've seen a few other of his trainings. I've hired people out of his classes. All I can say is, you got to give him a try.
Fantastic. And if you are interested in a master class in TikTok from driving sales in Las Vegas, if you want some humor in your life, you should definitely watch Jeff and I in the room as we do a TikTok video live. But there's also some very interesting data around TikTok and automotive that Gail goes over in the course. The video is on our YouTube channel. You can check it out. And it will be on our website soon. The audio format is already up if you prefer the audio, but I'd recommend video just because it's humorous, but also very informative. There's a lot of different books on electric cars. Also, of course, the movie Who Killed the Electric Car Part 1 and Part 2. You should definitely check out. Here's a few that I selected. Go ahead, Jeff.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is going to be a nice, fun show. And As always, we have our disclaimer here because it basically says that the views and opinions expressed on the Auto Hub show today or any other day are those of our guest speakers and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the show or Ian or Jeff. So please check it out if you want to read all the details. Ian.
And definitely don't miss us live. We will be in San Diego next month with a bunch of other podcasters. There are slots available. We also are going to be doing our ambush interviews live from the show. We will have our volunteer camera crew, Jeff's wife, with us, and my wife will also be there, as will Larry with his wife, from my understanding. So it should be a lot of fun. Used Car Week San Diego. You can register now. Just it's the 14th to the 17th in San Diego. We did the show in Toronto. We're looking forward to that show. So go ahead, Jeff.
Well, thanks again for joining us. We have a very eclectic group of people here. We got a little bit of a late start because we got to see all the cool new stuff joining us in the EV world. And what's very interesting is the fact that there's EVs coming out left, right, and center. I mean, that video didn't include all the Chevys and the holy cow, they got Equinoxes and Blazers and Bolt TUVRES TUXs and stuff like that. And all the Korean brands. And we have a really great group of people joining us today. All some very, very awesome and very knowledgeable people from all different sides of the EV world. And first of all, I'm going to introduce somebody new to the show, who is Ken Hendricks, joining us from the beautiful Vancouver, BC, Canada, home of the mountains, the waters, the fish, and the EVs, one of the EV's greatest penetrations of sales. And Ken is with the Automotive Retailers Association of BC. Ken, please introduce yourself. Tell us your connection to the EV world, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me on as a guest. So my connection with the EV world started only about 4 years ago. And it was a topic. Well, first, who the Automotive Retailer Association represents is we represent in BC what's called the aftermarket industry. And that's just basically the used industry or anything that happens to that vehicle after it's sold new. And that includes your collision repair, your mechanical repair, your towing, and of course your auto recycling. And while it occurred to me about 4 years ago that the dialogue really started to increase, but everyone was talking about the new cars, new car experience, and nobody was actually dealing with the used aspect of it. And we just saw, I think it was the top 20 of all these new models coming out, but all these cars have a life cycle, and they're going to be sold multiple times. They all become used cars. They're going to break down. They're going to have to be needed to be serviced out of warranty, and eventually they're going to have to be recycled. And so what we created with the help from the provincial government was a program called EV Friendly. And what this program is doing is trying to provide the tools and resources out to industry to help educate them and to help to prepare them for this transition. And it was a simple case of, at that time, I think the government was just assuming, as were many people, that the existing infrastructure that has developed over 100 years was just going to be able to service EVs. Simply not the case. It's a new technology, new investments in equipment and training. So that was that's why we started the EV Friendly project. And that's what it's all about. And really just to demystify the EVs and to help educate both industry and consumers as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. It's quite deep, and we're glad to have you here because the big question will be what happens after you buy that shiny new EV and etc. And so next, actually, it's kind of a really good segue into what happens after you buy that shiny new EV. Is Brent Seavey from XCare in somewhere in Michigan. I believe, anyways. And Brent, please introduce yourself. And you're no stranger to the fans of the Auto Hub show, or Ian or myself.
You know what? Thanks for having me on today. I've always loved it coming on the Auto Hub show. I'm a Tesla veteran. Spent 4.5 years there helping to set up the used car department and the remarketing department at Tesla. And now I am vice president of business development at XCare. Accelerate Auto's insurance vertical for EVs. So basically about 3 or 4 years ago, we developed XCare because no extended warranty was really doing a decent job of helping people who were buying electric vehicles. A lot of legacy tactics, a lot of legacy practices. And so when we designed Xcare, we designed it to mirror the factory extended coverage that Tesla offers, with a lower deductible, and also extended it to Model 3 and now Model Y as well. A lot of people don't know is that Tesla has actually stopped selling extended warranties for their Model X's past 2021 model year. So basically, if you want to cover your Tesla from this point forward, it's Xcare or it's Wing It. We're very proud to support our community, very active in the community. We have sponsorships of owners clubs coast to coast, going down to Florida actually to join our friends down there at the Owners Club in Florida. So happy to be here today. Happy to put my 2 cents in for what it's worth. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you. You know, no offense to anybody, but I'm a little scared the manufacturer won't sell warranties on a product over 2 years old. So
actually, let me give you just a little insight on that real quick, if I may. Tesla, whenever they sell an extended warranty, they have to keep those funds off the books until the extended warranty is actually passed. So they'll sell this extended warranty. They're not allowed to declare that money as income. They have to wait 8 years if you buy it at time of purchase, right? If you buy a 4-year extension, they have to wait 8 years to realize any funds from that warranty on the books. And yet during that 8-year period, they're fully responsible for parts, service, and care. So it's actually a losing proposition for them to sell a warranty just because of the way they, as a manufacturer, have to declare the funds. We are not hampered by that. We can invest our funds prudently when they come in. We can declare those funds as part of our income on the books, immediately upon receipt. So we're in the warranty business. Tesla is in the car building business, and we have this beautiful copacetic relationship.
well, perfect. And hey, that's what insurance is, right? It's take that money, invest it, make gobs of money, and pay out the odd claim too. Just lots of claims. Next, we have with us an EV pundit extraordinaire and one of my favorite people to follow on LinkedIn, James Carter. I believe, James, you're in the Toronto area. Please introduce yourself and your viewpoint on the EV world, where we're going.
Oh, thanks again very much for having me here today, and it's good to be on with lots of other very extraordinarily knowledgeable people. So I feel quite honored to be here again. Just quickly, a quick background about me. My background, nearly 20 years with Toyota in Australia, Japan, and here in Canada. And you're right, yep, here in Toronto. And since then, last 6 years have been running my business called Vision Mobility, which does consulting work and sometimes some content work for manufacturers, for tier ones, for others in mobility as well. So that's my background. But so do I get to kick it off about what I think about EVs? I feel honored to
So you have an opinion? Is that you're saying you have an opinion, James, on EVs? No.
Well, sometimes I'm a bit quiet about stuff like that. So I'm just it's a good feeling to at least have a platform to be able to say something about that. So
of course.
Yeah. All right. Let me start. I think one of the things that we're really seeing is just look at new car sales and where they're heading and what these numbers are saying. We're looking at increases of 50, 60, 70% year on year, no matter where you live. If you live in Australia, where I grew up, same thing, off the lower base. If we look in, BC, which is right now the leader in new car sales for electric vehicles in North America, which is just amazing. We're seeing that same sort of growth mirror countries that have already been there, like Norway, like parts of Europe. And we're all on this hockey stick upwards trajectory, and it's not going to stop. And there's all these things behind it that we have to think about, especially on retail side. Like Ken talked about earlier, we heard about what does the aftermarket have to do? And I did a big study for AIA about 5 years ago, trying to identify some of those things. And right now, that hockey stick is also causing things like Brent to Xcare to really start filling these gaps. With warranties and things that are not being done. So really what we're seeing is this huge growth of EV from the new car side really start to fill out the rest of the industry around that. And that is a super exciting time, a super exciting place to be right now.
Fantastic.
Thank you. And that's a great viewpoint. Now, last but not least, is the person that gets to see all the cool new stuff before it even hits the road or whatever you want to call it. And Patrina Gentile is joining us from Toronto. She got picked up for something small like ABC or CBS before this to talk, but she joined us a moment late. Patrina, say hi and introduce yourself and tell us your opinion on this fine topic.
Sure. Hi, it's nice to be here. I'm an automotive journalist and I basically cover all vehicles, and I've been doing it for almost 20 years. I think one of the first electric vehicles I drove was the Tesla Roadster, the original back in 2010. And I've been driving a lot of them recently all over the globe. So a couple of weeks ago, I was in Tennessee driving the new Nissan Ariya. I was also in Colorado a couple of weeks ago driving the new Mercedes-Benz EQS SUV that's all electric. I've driven a GMC Hummer pickup truck off-roading in Arizona, the Cadillac Lyriq in Utah. I just actually had a really cool experience driving the Tesla Model 3 in Montreal yesterday with Elias Makos. He's a radio host there, and he's one of the few people, 160,000 people in North America who have the full self-driving system on his vehicle. So we tested that out. Very cool. I have to say, this is for me the most exciting time, and I know most people will agree, for the auto industry, because we've never seen so much change. But having said that, you know, I'm excited about this transition, but there's still a lot of obstacles facing the electric vehicle market, especially the infrastructure, the lack of infrastructure in Canada. That really needs to be boosted up, as well as the price premium that you're paying for these vehicles, because, you know, let's face it, you could get 2 Honda Civics, gas powered, for the price of one electric vehicle. So there's still a lot of issues that I think that we need to deal with before we get there.
Perfect. Well, I have 2 comments before I turn it over to Ian. First of all, I predict that you will be able to drive your EV into a car wash, and while they're washing your car, you're going to have charging pads underneath that are totally weather protected. You'll come out the other end 80% charged. And by the way, if anybody uses that, I want 10%. And the other thing, Patrina, you got guts. You're going to drive a self-driven car, riding a self-driven car in Montreal. You got guts.
Yeah.
It was really cool. It was really cool to see. I have to be honest with you, especially when you're in old Montreal and you're dealing with pedestrians and you're dealing with motorcycles and, you know, parked cars on either side of the street. And it, you know, it messes up. There are times absolutely where it messes up. I can't understand the construction signs and stuff, but to see the technology and where it is really quite impressive.
And in Montreal.
Yeah, and if you haven't been to Montreal, the driving there is interesting.
Yes.
Ian, next question, please.
Obviously, legacy OEMs are introducing new EV product faster than you can say Tesla. They're also planning on threatening to follow the new OEMs by going to a direct consumer sales model. There was actually a post this morning. Ford again has fired another volley over the franchise dealers to say, well, we're going to change things. So it's very interesting. Is this a legitimate idea or just a temporary gimmick in your opinion? Let's start with, let's start with James on this.
Oh, wow. All right. So, you know, I think I spent a bunch of time, you know, out with dealers at Toyota. So I can see where some of the challenges are. You know, both from trying to go towards a model like this and already the things that consumers find more difficult today. And I think one of the key things that Tesla's really done well is really streamline the sales process. That they don't have that back and forth on the trade. And yeah, you could argue there's some discussion on you know, the trade to be had, but the rest of the sales process, you know, there's no, you know, carrying on with that. So I really like that streamline, you know, click it, you can have it, put down your deposit. It makes it really, really easy. And I think that's great. Where I think Tesla in particular, and this comes from both my experience and certainly what we hear in the research that we do is there are some gaps post sale. Like I know my delivery experience was pretty awful, and I hear that over and over again, and there's lots of things within that, and then on the server side, things within that there's some good ideas and they really should work, but it's not cohesive. It doesn't come together like a good dealership, and it creates problems that it's the first I've really ever seen in my many years of going in and out of dealerships for both sales and service. So I think that's a real key thing that they need to work on, and I personally believe it's not really a function of them being independent. I think it's more of a function of their in some ways not having their dealership process up to scratch. And maybe as a company, they just don't have the focus on it like they should. But in terms of which path is better, honestly, I think from an OEM side, there's two big benefits, I think, from wanting to keep it more in-house. Is A, one is more control, and B is the likely ability to drive out more cost savings. And then that's the reason why Tesla wanted to do it that way, and return some of that gross margin back into the OEM, into the factory, rather than have that separately. But I'd love to hear what others have got to say.
Why don't we get the former Tesla fanboy and driver's thoughts on this? Let's go with Brent on this.
The whole industry, I think, is going toward the agency model, where people are basically going to purchase their car one price online. They're going to pick up their car at the dealership location, where they'll get hopefully a decent walkthrough, and the dealership will be compensated basically for delivering the car. I think the days of if you've seen the movie Cadillac Man, the whole kind of negotiating and back and forth and pressure tactics, and you see that with Ford now. They bring out the Ford F-150 Lightning, and a $75,000 Lightning you sell it for $140,000. And there's somebody out there that just has to have it, and so they freaking pay it. But at the end of the day, I think what they're trying to do right now is they realize that their business model is circling the drain, and so they're trying to make as much money as they can while they can. And I don't really bat them that. I mean, if somebody's willing to pay, I'm a free market capitalist, knock yourself out. But I think at the end of the day, most people just want to buy something. They don't want to hassle. You ever go online, you see 6 different prices for something, and you're like, I wonder if this one's better, or I wonder if this one's inferior, or whatever. At Tesla, you just go in, you build out your car, there's the price. If you like the trade value, fine. If not, sell it to Carvana or let it rust in your garage. Who cares? That model takes all the pressure off of the process. So I think the agency model is definitely coming to most manufacturers. It's just a matter of time. And I think Ford is playing this one really well, because they put out a lot of warnings. Hey, if you're skinning the customers alive, we're going to make, there are going to be repercussions, And then they let their dealerships basically skin them alive. And now they've got a lot of backup to go in and say, okay, you know what, we're tired of the games. We're splitting off, Ford's EVs, and we're going to go right to the agency model, like it or leave it.
Interesting. Patrina, I mean, you deal with a lot of manufacturers and probably some retail. Yeah. What's your opinion?
Well, you know what, you're seeing other OEMs following that business model that Tesla has. So you have, for example, Genesis, who's setting up the boutique retail stores in busy areas like shopping malls, and they're doing the fixed pricing, no haggle, full transparency there, and I think consumers are liking that. But what's really interesting too is now they're moving to a model where they're actually opening up full dealerships. So they're opening up in Markham and a couple places across Canada. So you have that full dealership experience, and people can come in, kick the tires a little bit more so than before. But I think that's what consumers are demanding, and especially this younger consumer that are coming up. They are, at least what I'm hearing from them, is they're getting really frustrated when they try to, order a car, and they ask for this and this and this, and often they'll say, what, you can't get that, but here's a car that's close to it. And they don't want that. With Tesla, they can order exactly what they want, and this is what they get, and this is the price. So I think that you're going to see other manufacturers trying to replicate that business model, because it makes sense.
Appreciate that. Ken?
think it gets much harder. I think when you're talking new, I think there's advantages to that sales approach. And we're certainly seeing an increase in the online sales. I think it's limited to a certain culture group and age demographic at this point. But what complicates it again is the used market. And that's going to be much slower to transition. And so it's going to confuse things that if you're into a used market, that you're still operating on the older models and going in person, haggling, negotiating. I think that's going to, some of that again is going to spill into the new. So it's not going to be an easy transition. And I don't know if it'll ever fully mold into that model where you can just simply go online and buy a used Tesla at a certain price, and it's going to come, what you get delivered is exactly what you expected. So I think that's going to really complicate the model. I also think and there's probably another topic we'll get into, but it's the whole service end as well, which is going to extremely complicate that.
Yeah, Jeff, maybe you can talk a little bit about used cars, but more importantly, the service side of electric used cars.
You bet. One thing though that one thing I've had mentioned to me that's a little bit of an interesting thing on the direct to dealer or direct to consumer sale on high demand items is one thing that happens on the dealer level right now is you get a lot of people that are buying, a lot of used car dealers are buying new cars under other people's names. And then they're immediately converting it to them. I'm in the used car business. I watch the auctions, and there is regularly, I've already seen a Lightning on the dealer auction and pulled an astronomical figure. Even Kia Niro EVs pulling and Ioniq 5s are pulling 15 and 20,000 over MSRP to dealers. So when you do online, you get 10 different names. A dealer gives them money up front. They order it. And they take that lovely new Ford, whatever it is, in 3 years that goes direct, and they flip it for a profit, depending on how the market is. But, Rivian's just recalled, there was a real big thing there, and Tesla lovers are going, see, you guys ain't where we are. But they just recalled a ton of vehicles, and they haven't delivered that many, so they've recalled most of them. And so it's got an interesting challenge for EVs, which I mentioned just before we went live, was service on EVs. It's a big challenge, and I see Ken looking directly at me because this is perfect, because I want to ask him directly because he's in that side of the business. And there's nightmare experiences that people are experiencing on older EVs, and of course that's why Brent's in business. And considering some of these stuff is now over 10 years old, what's happening with repairing and servicing EVs? And Ken, I'll go with you first. I know you can only speak for British Columbia, Canada, but we'll hit everybody else. And we do have a gentleman that was with us, but he logged out as a recall fiend. I was going to ask him, but he might come back. But Ken, what's going to happen there?
That's a big question, Jeff, and has a lot of sort of tentacles. I think what worries me most on the service end is the Tesla model. And if OEs are going to follow that model, it's much more of a controlling model where they want to control the market. They don't want to share the repair information out to the rest of the aftermarket. That's a real problem. And yet they can't service. It's fine when you're in your densely populated urban centers, but BC is a huge province geographically. And I think there's 3 or 4 Tesla service centers. We've heard nightmare stories of someone up island just having to get glass repair and having to drive that vehicle about 200 kilometers down to a service center in Victoria at an astronomical price. All fine when you've got the money and you can afford that $160,000 or you have that warranty. But when you're buying that 10-year-old Tesla, that's much more problematic. So I think that's one of my biggest concerns there with moving forward with that model. And we're starting to see that happen now in the market. So there's a lot of dialogue now, even at the federal level with the right to repair.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go to Brent there next. And I have to tell you that a while back, I was looking to move to figure an older Model S would be kind of fun to buy. And I reached out to Brett and said, what do you think? He said, we'll avoid year X, year Y, blah, blah, blah. But of course, then they started selling for more than they did new. So I changed my mind. But so Brett, what's your take on this with repairing and servicing them?
You know, the right to repair is definitely heating up here stateside as well. By the way, I'm not in Michigan, I'm in Illinois. Naperville, baby, represent. Anyways, so yeah, it is warming up a lot here stateside. Massachusetts, I believe, has recently reached an accord with Tesla to provide them manuals and such. And just about any state in the U.S. now, you can buy Tesla parts if you are a repair station. The only thing that they won't sell you directly is anything to do with the high voltage battery pack. So the high voltage battery pack and all those associated things, they will not sell you directly. Just about anything else, if you're an independent repair station, you can. Here in the States, we have this company called Electrify Garage. They're in Florida and New Hampshire. They're looking at a franchise model for the entire U.S. shortly, and perhaps even Canada, where these are ex-Tesla grease monkeys, and I say that with the most adoration. I love mechanics. These are guys that have basically left Tesla with a wealth of information and experience, who are starting these independent shops. So they're springing up all over the place. The older ones definitely, when you're in that price demographic, you're probably not going to spend $200 an hour at Tesla to have your car serviced anyways. So the likelihood that we'll see a lot more EV service places springing up in the very near future is very real and is happening at an accelerated pace here in the US. And, frankly speaking, Teslas are made to be very fast cars to manufacture and very expensive cars to fix. And the reason that I say it that way is because they build them like military vehicles. They don't build them where individual components can be taken apart and repaired. They build them so that the components have to be taken out and replaced, which is really great when you're manufacturing vehicles. All this crap is welded together, and all you do is bolt in and down the line, and you can build this car in the time it takes you to eat a ham sandwich. But the issue then becomes when that particular component burns out. We'll say a driver's seat heating element. Well, you can't disassemble the driver's seat and replace the heating element. You have to replace the entire driver's seat. There's one welded contiguous unit. The skin on the seat is sewn on. There's no zippers on the side like you see on some other vehicles. You'll see a very discreet zipper. No zipper on the side. You have to replace the entire driver's seat. It's welded from the floor plate on up. So that makes it a very fast car to manufacture, because you just bang, bang, bang in these seats. But when it comes time to repairing the vehicle, it is a component replacement repair, rather than taking a component apart and replacing a fuse inside, replacing an element of that component. So that's where XCare basically has seen a lot of our success, because these cars, as they get older, they're fabulous cars. I drive a Tesla myself. I'll drive them till the day I die. But when they get older, the service frequency is very broad, but the cost of repair when you do have to fix the car is bloody expensive, and that's where people invest in XCare to basically just mitigate those shocks.
So that's really the point. This modular construction repair thing is actually, it's even happening on the legacy brands too. It's, you can't buy a piece, you just buy the whole thing, and might be a good thing with wreckers later on. It's but it'll be a fortune. Comments came from Peter Smith here that he basically said that there's no right to repair with Ontario and Tesla. I don't know about in BC, but it sounds like, Ken, you're right. And Canada, of course, they operate a little bit differently than the US. And then, concern with insurance companies moving forward is that whole idea of replacing the whole thing for whatever. And we're already on a kick here where they're writing cars off for less damage. And so that will happen. Next, we'll go with
Jeff, just let me, they wrote my car off, my Tesla S off for $4,000. So that was it exactly. They just couldn't get the parts. They couldn't get the timing, everything. They just said, forget it, part the car out.
Bloody hell, for $4,000.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tailgate and a bumper cover.
Oh my God, that reminds me of the early days. There was a time when we first started the used car department at Tesla. we had to refurbish the vehicles actually before we sold them. And so the tailgate had a big dent in it because somebody opened it up in their garage, did a Raptor or something with it. And so we had to replace the tailgate on a Model S. There was a time I recall we had 7 tailgates in the entire United States parts inventory. And I couldn't get a tailgate for like 3 months for this car. And the guy's calling me every week, where's my Tesla? Where's my Tesla? I'm like, yeah, we're running into some issues with cosmetic reconditioning and blah, 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 just trying to smooth it over. But there were literally 7 tailgates in the US. I had to go up to my global remarketing manager and finally get him to put his boot on parts and get us that tailgate, because otherwise it just wasn't going to happen. So I can see how something like that can happen. They can, we don't have the parts and we owe you a repair within a legal amount of time, so we're going to write off your car.
Yeah.
That's brutal for underwriting and for future insurance rates when you have to do that occasionally. It's a big ass claim.
$143,000 claim.
Jeez, God.
And we're wondering why our insurance rates are going up, not because of hurricanes, because of electric cars.
Oh,
Katrina,
sorry. I forgot to add in the $80,000 rental fee for my Tesla rental for 7 months.
Oh my God, 80 grand. Could have bought you one and handed it to you.
Pretty much.
The trouble is they couldn't get one to replace it.
Don't you love the growing pains of the modern world?
Yeah, no kidding. Katrina, what's your take on this whole servicing thing? Because I know you get to hear it from some of the promoters for the brands.
Well, you know what? I wanted to actually share a story about a new vehicle, a new EV, which I found really interesting, also dealing with these types of issues. I interviewed David Suzuki, the well-known environmentalist. He was driving a Volvo electric vehicle from Vancouver to Toronto, and he had a little bit of a mishap. So in Brandon, Manitoba, he hit some black ice, a pothole, and he blew a tire. And this is Saturday night. He calls Volvo and they're like, we do not have one tire in Canada. So, but it's David Suzuki. They're like, okay, well, we're going to send a tow truck out. We're going to flatbed you from Brandon to Winnipeg to our dealerships. And we're going to take the tire off of a vehicle that's already been sold in the dealership, put it on your vehicle so you can make the rest of the trek back. So I thought it was really interesting. Yeah, if there's not one tire in the entire country, this is a serious issue, right?
Now, isn't this the case that Volvo actually provided him the car as the PR situation?
Absolutely. Yeah. They, it was like a stunt to say, hey, look at how easy this is to drive across Canada. And he's, I want to save the environment. And then of course I asked him at the very end, so how are you getting home? Oh, I'm flying.
At least he's not flying private. Right?
Yeah, true, I guess.
Ian, quiet, no politics. So, Katrina, again, the thought about the servicing, what else can you give your opinion on that too?
Yeah, you know what? It's something that I've heard often about a lot of the vehicles being written off, issues with servicing the vehicles. It's so difficult to them, or people will be out of their vehicle for like weeks or months. And that's really frustrating for a consumer because, you want your car and when you're servicing and it's taking a long time and it's very expensive too, it just makes it more difficult to make that transition for other people. It makes them weary to jump on that EV bandwagon.
I'd love to hop on that real briefly. We do a lot of trending, as you can imagine, when we sell extended warranties. The average repair that we cover is between 3 and 5 days. So there are those outlier stories. Oh, I was in South Dakota and didn't have a tire and the snow came in and I had to eat my children. And that's great. But at the end of the day, most people are 3-4 days in and out. I go up on if you go up on the forums and everything and you see these people, Tesla's screwing me. I've been 8 weeks without my car. Those are such outliers, but those are the people that make all the noise, right? If you had a great service experience, you just had a great service experience, and you take your kids to soccer, and you go home, you eat your dinner, and you think about blogging it. But when you've been out of your car for weeks, belly up to any bar in the city and go, I had a great experience today. The service people, yeah, whatever. but belly up to that same bar and go, man, I got hammered at the service department. Let me tell you about so-and-so Chevy. People love bad news, and it spreads like fire.
Actually, I want to say something about this right to repair thing, and I think it's interesting because there was a story about I believe and Brent can probably help me out here, but I believe there's a known fault with early Model S's where AC fluid leaks down into the batteries or into the inverters or something and causes them the bottom end to rust out and all sorts of issues to happen from there. And it's an expensive repair and Tesla wants to replace the whole battery to do it. There are a couple of shops out there that'll pull your battery out, go through it individually, refix it up. I believe Gruber in California is one, but there are others around. There's one in Quebec, and they, instead of a $30,000 or $40,000 fix, it's a $5,000 fix. And I think what the important point here is that what we really see that the aftermarket does, and the real benefit that they provide, is that it's almost like keeping the OEMs honest in some ways, that they found out new and better ways to do stuff. Then find out new and better ways to do it cheaply so that the customer ends up, in an extreme case, instead of having a $30,000 bill, they ended up with a $5,000 bill. Or, we wind that down a bit. Instead of ending up with a $3,000 or $4,000 bill, they ended up with a $500 bill. And to me, this is a really, especially, we're not talking new cars or even 3 or 4 years in, but once these cars get to 8 or 10 years old, people really don't have that sort of money to fix them up. It's really important that we keep these cars on the road and we have these ability to fix the cars that are low cost and we can keep people going. And if you're on a low income, the last thing you want is, even in a traditional car, you don't want that engine to blow up. You don't want that transmission to blow up. And if it does happen, that there is a cost-effective repair to make that happen. So, I think this is really important thing within this that we really got to think about and keep in mind.
I love how free market capitalism keeps itself honest, and it's true. You're seeing a lot of these indie shops now popping up that are providing very, very simple repairs. My mind is brought back to the Model 3 guy that had the front of the battery. There's a coupling for the fluid that goes around the battery and it's made out of plastic. And it was damaged by a rock. This rando rock hit this thing on the road and cracked it open. And Tesla wanted to replace the entire battery. And Electrified Garage actually went out and got a brass fitting from like Home Depot or something and fashioned a terrific repair for this thing and charged them a few $100. So the delta was between thousands of dollars for a new battery and all the labor that Tesla was going to charge this guy and $300 to $400. It was ludicrous. It was a $15 brass fitting, and now he's got a brass fitting on there that could probably take a 38 caliber shot.
So the recycling industry can add a lot of support to this. It needs support itself, and this is one of the things that our association is trying to address in terms of the quality control and the training that is needed across the country. One of the biggest challenges is actually buying the salvage vehicles. A high percentage of export, especially if Teslas go outside of the country, which a lot of people don't realize, it can be as high as 30%. And from a critical mineral standpoint, that's crazy. That's a loss of investment. If the government is going to be incenting these vehicles, and when they get into an accident, if they go outside of the country, or someone else is benefiting from those parts. And that's one of the biggest challenges. We do our own internal studies just here in BC because we can measure what are the collision shops, what are they ordering or what are they requesting from the recyclers, and what is the return of the replies. And sometimes it's like a 1%. That means for every 100 parts that are requested, they only have one reply. And it's because when we look, where are these vehicles going? They are going outside of the province and in many instances outside of the country. And that's something that is not being talked about and that really needs to, both at our provincial level, but also at a federal level as well.
Those are definitely great points. I mean, as we look at the new act in the US, it's going live January 1 for Inflation Reduction /EV. And we look at the attraction from a dealer perspective, because there's limitations to getting a tax rebate for those used vehicles. I know there's a fight right now between Korea, Japan, and the U.S. government because they're excluding certain vehicles, and that's, I'm sure, why you're seeing the ID4 move to Tennessee versus Germany. But the question then becomes, what quality used vehicle can you get for less than $25,000 to pick a number, whether it be in Canada or the US, that would then qualify? Because I know the Canadian government is talking about something in that area if Justin can come up with some money. But what's your opinion on the top five? I mean, Ken, you deal with a lot of vehicles that, obviously fixing vehicles. I mean, what's your opinion on the top five used electric?
Well, in terms of the service and repair, I mean, it's their Tesla, Leafs, Bolts. That's where we're seeing most of the requests from, anyways. And again, it's just the challenge of, there's a lot of challenges. The challenge of finding the used parts, but it's also just challenging who can do that work and who can service them. There's very few in BC that could do, as you said, take a battery and swap out the individual cells or modules. There's not even a handful. I can't even count five. I could probably count 2 or 3.
Wow.
And that's an industry that we need to support, because again, you can't have that 10 or 12-year-old vehicle and then have the OE say, yeah, we'll swap out the battery. Here's 20,000. That's just crazy. It's not going to support the market. It's not going to induce growth.
Well, I like what you said there too. And the thing is that, we keep hearing about how cost per kilowatt hour on batteries has come down so exponentially over the last 5 years at Tesla, and that's how they're able to be so profitable, et cetera, et cetera. Yet if you blow your battery on your Tesla Model S, you're still paying 20 grand for the battery. If you follow the cost of that battery over the last 5 years and all the stuff that's been published about the cost per kilowatt hour, that battery should cost you about 12 grand now. So Tesla's holding an 8 grand margin on that battery just because they can, which is fine. And I'm a capitalist and I understand, but at some point, replacement battery costs have to follow the actual cost to a reasonable degree without skinning the public. What I'd like to see is like Firestone Service and Meineke and all these other big national brands here in the States actually take up EV servicing. If they would dedicate a commensurate amount of stalls and training for their people to start servicing EVs, they would make money hand over fist. And right now, nobody's picking that up. You call Firestone Service right now, telling you want your Tesla service, they'll laugh and hang up. So it's an untapped market for service that is going to make some people bleeding rich, both locally and nationally, guaranteed.
Yeah, I mean, when you
I
look at,
think the reality is going to be that as we sell more and more EV cars, there's going to have to be more and more available service.
Absolutely.
You can't rely on your OEM or whoever that may be to service it. Tesla's already got that backlog of cars waiting and waiting and waiting, booking months and months ahead just to get a whatever.
Sometimes, yeah.
I mean, when you look at the original hybrids back in the day, now we're going back to 1999. I remember when local fire departments even needed training. I mean, I remember being at the auto show and I had a customer come over who had an original Honda Insight and had some esoteric questions about batteries. And the guy from Honda who worked for them, Honda Canada anyway, wasn't even able to answer the questions about batteries. So, and this was, I put him together with the guy because he was the national trainer. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about here, but maybe this guy can help you. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to have a volume of cars, and with government incentives going the way they look to be going, you're going to have a lot of interest in used vehicles from a dealer perspective and elsewhere. But where are you going to service them? Even a local dealership picked a franchise staff. Can they even do an inspection on those properly? Who knows? James, what do you think?
No, most of them can't.
Yeah.
They plug the charge port in, they watch the little light blink. They look on the dash to make sure there's no warning lights. They check the tires and brakes, and they kick it out the door. And that's all they can do because they don't have the diagnostic to get into things. The beautiful thing about cars like Tesla is they're 97% self-diagnosing. So if there isn't a light on the dash, there really is very little that can be wrong. I take it for a road test, make sure the suspension isn't clunking around, make sure you're not getting any weird thumping noise on hard acceleration or anything. But besides that, essentially, if there ain't a light on the dash, ain't nothing wrong.
Right.
Actually, I wanted to pick up something really for Ken here that I think is important, and also, Brent, would be interesting to hear your comments. One of the technologies we're really seeing this huge growth in is OTA, over-the-air software updates. And, I know my Tesla, every couple of weeks, there's a new software update. It's fixing recalls on the car. It's giving the kids new games. It's doing all sorts of really cool stuff. And it's a great way of doing it. However, from a right to repair point of view, or to figure out how, unless you have access to the system, how do you know what's going on? And I think that's something that, certainly I'd love to hear Brent and Ken talk about, because there could be some really sticky issues, especially when the cars age.
Yeah, in more ways than you might think. So certainly from that repairs standpoint, absolutely. But it can affect other industries, for towing, for instance.
Right.
So we were doing some work with a little company out in Vancouver, and overnight Tesla had updated its software, which has altered the procedures for loading and securing it. And it wasn't working.
That's awesome. I knew how to do this yesterday.
It was just like their iPhone update. Finally, they got it figured out, but that can have serious repercussions. Now, this was also a trained tow operator, so he understood it. But to an untrained tow operator, they might try just to force it up on that deck and damage it. So, yes, absolutely serious implications.
I do think on the topic of towing, we may have to look at what some of the European countries do, where they have a flat deck with a gooseneck hook that comes over, and four hooks go underneath the car and lift it up and put it on there. It might be a simpler way.
There you go. Especially if you're in a tight parking space.
One quick thing about what we're talking about, used vehicles here in the EV space. The average time span a car spends on the road in North America is under 10 years. That's the average lifespan of a car. When you talk a EV, it has a significantly exponentially higher price point. So people tend to keep that car a longer point in time. So migrating it into a used car positioning is going to be a much shorter lifespan for that vehicle. So you're looking at primarily probably 80% of ownership will be a single point ownership of an EV in the future.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
But then when you look at the infrastructure, the infrastructure problem is the main concern of EVs, in my humble opinion right now.
Yeah, infrastructure is big. Not so much for Tesla as for the other manufacturers, because Tesla has their supercharger network throughout the U.S. and the demographic for Tesla are mostly people that own their own homes, and so they charge at home for 99% of what they're using the car for. But yeah, infrastructure is going to be huge. Single ownership, yeah, absolutely. People call me all the time. I've had my Tesla for 4 years. It's been a joy. I want to cover it for the next 6 years, the next 8 years. I want to keep this thing until the wheels fall off. That's fantastic. Teslas are actually designed to last for about 15 years or 500,000 miles. So the delta between the ordinary ownership experience and an EV experience, especially a Tesla, is pretty broad. So they'll see second lives, third lives, but the first owners are keeping them, from what we're seeing, anywhere from 8 to 10 years. So it's a beautiful thing, just keeping us in business. But yeah, even second life, then, as long as it's less than 10 years, we can throw a warranty on it and help you out into the future as well.
There's an article today, just came out on Forbes. I put a link there if you're curious. They're projecting lifespan of 10 to 20 years. Obviously depends on the scenario. If you're an Uber driver or a taxi cab driver or whatever, that may not be the case.
Sure.
But it's an interesting article. But Petrina hasn't said anything in a while, so I wanted to include her in the conversation. Go ahead.
Okay, I had a couple things I wanted to say, and I guess I'll start with maybe the infrastructure that you mentioned, because that is a big issue. I was shocked when I drove. I had a Tesla for a couple of days. Of course, you can't get it from the press fleet because Elon Musk doesn't like journalists, so there is no test fleet. So I borrowed one off of a car sharing platform, and I was so impressed with how easy it was to charge at the superstar charger stations. They were, 20 kilometers apart on major highways. Every time I pulled over, there were at least, 15 charging spots. I didn't need a separate app. I didn't need to worry about anything. I could just pull up, charge. It was literally fast, like less than 20 minutes, full charge. I could watch Netflix in the car. And when you compare it to the infrastructure, the lack of infrastructure, where I've driven, the Ioniq 5, the Volvos, like you name it, and I always have an issue with charging. Finding them, having to download a different app for them. Often they're not working. Often there is a gas-powered vehicle that's parked in those spots. So it's really frustrating when you're trying to drive an electric vehicle and that infrastructure isn't there. And there's also, if you live in a condo, if you're in an older home, I went to visit my mom and plugged in overnight and blew all the fuses in the house while I was charging. So there's a lot of frustration here. So Tesla's learned it well. I don't know why the government can't replicate that, because it's really frustrating. In terms of EV readiness, Canada is, I think, 13 out of 14 countries in the world in terms of being ready for that infrastructure. So I wanted to add that. And there was something else I want to say, but I already forgot.
I'll mention something and then you'll remember.
Yeah.
But I had the experience at a mall literally Saturday, where this was a big mall in a suburb with a very, very high uptake on Teslas. And they had a bank of superchargers. And I mean, literally, they could have been 15 to 20 of them.
Yeah.
They were full of Teslas, and there were 5 people sitting there waiting.
Wow.
Now, the problem being, of course, it's a mall, so they leave the car there for 6 hours.
They
But-
get fined for that, by the way. You get
Do
fined.
they?
Your car is done charging and you'll get a message on your app, and if you don't move that thing, they fine you by the minute after that.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Then again, you know
Yes,
what, if you bought it used and paid double the price of new, who cares for a $20 fine?
Yeah, you know what? You care when somebody takes their lipstick out and writes asshole on your windshield. Right, that's gonna
Give me a reminder of the other disclaimer.
I think I'd like to point out, though, that was a mall, which means it was a very dense population center. You probably had a lot of apartment buildings and condos and co-ops around that don't have electric vehicle charging. So you'll see at areas like that, it's a little bit more challenging. But on the freeway between towns where you truly don't have a choice, Tesla trends the living hell out of those, and they add capacity whenever they need to.
No question.
Just on
I
that
do
question, that quick statement there, in a high capacity density area, the Toronto community, take downtown Toronto, there's a condo every 4 inches. It's getting to be like New York City, Manhattan.
Sure.
None of them have electric charging capabilities in their basements.
Wow.
None.
Right. Older buildings especially, it's very hard to.
No, this is new builds. They don't have the capacity to charge the potential change of the infrastructure to automotive. They just don't have it. Right now we're 4% in Ontario on the EV. They don't design the buildings to compensate for that 4%.
Wow, that's tough, because if you see where the world is going, you kind of have to build for where you're going, not where you've been.
Yeah.
And if local business codes don't have the proviso in there that they have to provide at least the base wiring for future EV charging, then I think that's a gross oversight on the municipal level or the national level. And I think that's a conversation that needs to be had in Canada.
That is in household. You have to, since 2019, you must run a 240 conduit to a garage.
Fabulous. Or put the fuse box right out in the garage. Save yourself all that hassle and pigtail it right on.
Yeah, so that's in household, but in building, no,
Yeah.
it's not there.
There's been an
That's
ongoing
really
fight in
quite
my
sad.
condo
That is the
corp
direction
for
we're going.
5 years.
In my opinion, condo is the biggest barrier to like home charging, because it's 80% of total charge or 90% of total charging needs. if people live in condos, that is by far the biggest barrier for EV ownership. And you're right, that's the breakthrough that we really need. And unfortunately, to retrofit, it's very expensive, but we still have to do it. And we really need to find these breakthrough solutions to make this happen. And it is a huge opportunity for someone, but it has to be done. Just going on from what you said too, Peter, what we're seeing, I have a friend who works for one of the big developers doing condo stuff. And what they're finding right now is that obviously from early inception and planning of condos to actually letting people actually move in, there's probably a 6 or 8 year window. So those ones that are likely to be open in the 26, 27 planning, 28 planning that they're doing right now, they are putting in full conduit right through. And they're doing it because companies are starting to realize from a big picture point of view that if they put up these things, there's an ESG mandate that goes with it as well. So they really have to say to their investors what is really important about this so that they can get the pension funds to buy into this ESG mandate that they're doing. So that what we're seeing is outside of the EV industry, we're seeing this top level environmental point of view really start to put pressure on these codes. And they're really starting to level up their planning to incorporate EVs right across the total parkade that they'll be building out.
Well, here's a very troublesome trend here in Vancouver. I don't know if it's a trend, but it's just happened that there was a large native band that has a very large tract of land right almost downtown Vancouver. And they just fast-tracked the development of towers for 10,000 units of housing, apartments. And there's 900 parking stalls in the entire development. That is very interesting. I find it troublesome because, somebody thinks that we're going to go to the non-individual transport other than electric bike thing. But that's quite an interesting thing. 10,000 units of housings and 900 spots.
Yeah, so right down in Kitsilano.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And, leaving politics out, they can do whatever they want. They're self-governing. But there's a big developer there who's going to make about $10 billion. And it's interesting.
There's also a problem in Vancouver is street parking. It's just a lot of street parking. They're doing an interesting in London because London is really the same. People they don't have garages. Everyone parks in the street. So they're just converting the lampposts into charging stations. Yes. And that's easily something that, again, we can do in Vancouver. We just sort of have to look at what is existing infrastructure and how can we fit EVs on top of that.
Yeah, for sure. We're running out of time, but I'm going to put another question out for anybody. Here's the fun part, the bonus question. So I'm going to go to Patrina because she knows all of this stuff first. So bonus question, Cybertruck or Hummer?
Cybertruck.
Yes.
You know what? I mean, that's a tough. I will say it's a tough one because I loved driving the Hummer EV, especially off-roading with it and checking out the Watts to Freedom, and the crab walk. Really incredible. But I was at the launch. I think I was the only journalist in North America in the room when Elon Musk unveiled the Cybertruck. He wasn't allowing any journalists inside, and I got in because I knew a friend that knows the designer. So I went in and I got a chance to see it, and it was really impressive. And they did drives right by the SpaceX rocket and stuff. So it was really cool seeing it on the road. I mean, having said that, who knows what will happen, but it's a close one. But the Cybertruck holds something special because I've never seen a press launch like this in my entire life. And, I've covered everything, Geneva Auto Show, Frankfurt, where press launches are quite something. But this one really was interesting. It was like a concert and everyone just went nuts. And there was a lot of momentum there. So it's a close one, but I do like the Cybertruck.
I couldn't even get that room. You got in that room? I couldn't even get
got in that room. Yeah. I went in, like I said, I was supposed to cover it for CTV and CBC, the Canadian television stations. And when I went, they were like, nope, we're not letting you in. And I turned around and one of my friends was there. He's a Hollywood producer. So he said, you know what, come in with me, you'll be my +1. He had a personal invitation from Elon and the designer, and I'm like, I'm in there. So I think it was the only, like I say, I think it was the only journalist in North America in that room. And it was like nothing I've ever seen before.
Did I hear a giant mic drop? Boom. Okay, now I'm going to challenge James. Lucid Air or Plaid? Why?
I actually just drove a Plaid the other day, and holy smoke, far out, that thing's fast. That is nuts. It is absolutely nuts. The Plaid that I drove was actually a Model X, but still, and the Lucid looks beautiful. But that too big car for me. I prefer small cars that are more nimble and more city friendly, and I'm quite happy with my Model 3. So I would probably say neither and get a Model 3. But both of them are amazing, and I would be a happy owner in either one of them for different reasons. I really do like some of the technology that Lucid's brought out. I think it's great. But in terms of Lucid, that they are still, as a company as a whole, they're still quite a ways behind Tesla. And, I think there's probably some product maturity that needs to happen with them as well. But, all power to them. They've done a great job so far.
They've got another Saudi money to catch up.
Well, people love to slag Elon Musk, and Lord knows he deserves at least half of the stuff he gets. But I got to tell you something. I'm a big fan of Spaceballs, and anybody that names a car after that, a term in there's got to be is cool in my book. So Brent, VinFast or Fisker?
Oh God! Wow, that's like asking a vegetarian steak or chicken.
Why do you think I asked you?
You know what? I would probably do the VinFast just because they have a better chance of succeeding than Fisker. I think the Fisker Ocean is going to be an interesting side note in the EV in the annals of the EV history when it's written. I really don't have a whole lot of faith in them. I don't have a great deal of faith in VinFast either, so it was a really tough choice.
So Jeff, you forgot DeLorean in this list. Ken, do you want to comment on DeLorean?
What an attestation to a salesman. Fisker has a track record, other than he made one of the coolest looking cars, I think, ever. He's got a reputation of selling a whole bunch of, what's the term? Pile of goods. Where he keeps getting people to invest billions in him to come up with new stuff, like the new DeLorean.
It's amazing what people will throw money at, isn't it?
Well, there's that new Ferrari plug-in hybrid I hear for $1 million.
That's a Ferrari. It's going to be successful.
The new
no matter
Malcolm
what.
Bricklin.
Yeah.
Fisker's the new Malcolm Bricklin.
Yeah, exactly. Folks, thank you so much. We've reached the end of the time. Peter, I'd like to thank you for input always in the show. Before we close, I would like to ask everybody for their final comments. But Ken, we left you out on the new stuff there, but just comments on where do you think we're going in the EV world? And we know we're going to end up there. I think obviously we're going to end up there. It's just a question of when. And all I can think of is the Judge Dredd movie with Sylvester Stallone when he digs up that old Olds 442 and nobody knew what the heck that was.
Final thoughts. I want everyone to participate in the EV market. I don't want it to become where 50% of the population can afford to drive and the other 50% can't. I think doing that is just going to be building out the whole life cycle of that so that everyone can participate. That's sort of my final thoughts.
Perfect. Thank you, Patrina.
I'm just looking forward to this transition. Like I said, it is an exciting time. I'm looking forward to, I have a bunch of cool press trips coming up, driving the new Kia Niro EV in LA in a couple of weeks, and VinFast SUVs as well. So it's an exciting time. And I think the transition is going to take a little bit longer than we anticipate, but I think it's just because of the lack of infrastructure. I think once we get that going, I think consumers, and we get the price down, the price of batteries down, I think consumers will be a little bit more open to making that transition.
Perfect. So is it true that when you get a holiday, your number one destination is your backyard?
Exactly, yes. I stay in hiding. It's because it's so, I mean, I was driving, I won't even say not an electric vehicle. I was in Rome last week driving the Lamborghini Urus Performante on the racetrack. So, and it's going to be one of the last vehicles that we'll get with a full internal combustion engine because, you know, Lamborghini is also going that electric route. Next year, we'll see a hybrid and en route to all electric supercars as well. So, different
boy,
world.
you're everywhere. I am so jealous. James,
Yes.
final thoughts.
Look, this is a transition that is unstoppable. There is not going to be any ICE vehicles available in Canada in not too many years' time. And I think we need to bring that, we need to bear that in mind, that this transition is inevitable, it is happening, and it will create a whole bunch of new opportunities out there for people who want to think about what do we need to do to bring out some of these real bits of gold. And so I think the real important thing to leave people with that, the listeners here, is there is tons of opportunity in EV. There is tons of opportunity coming, and really sit down and think about what that is, because that could make you really, really rich. So that would be my parting thoughts here.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Brent.
Hi. We're talking about this transition to electric vehicles, but I think the broader, greater conversation is going to be the actual future transition to the post-ownership world, where basically most people don't own a vehicle anymore. They subscribe to a ride service that comes and autonomously picks them up and drops them off. I think that future is a lot closer than we think. I think the millennials are onto it. 75% of millennials would give up their car before they give up their internet. Most people are not even getting a driver's license at 16. They're foregoing driver's licenses. They could care less about driving. I think, sadly, because I grew up loving cars, I've had 54 cars myself. I really think the post-ownership world is coming. And most cars are on the road no more than 5% of the day. And so with resources being scarce, with questionable mining practices in a lot of countries, and all the other things that are kind of overshadowing the EV transition, I think the best way to actually make that secondary transition is to start preparing people for just not owning their car. If you could spend $500, $600 a month and be guaranteed within 5 minutes you have a ride wherever you'd like to go, why wouldn't you do that? So I think at the end of the day, we're going to see the post-ownership world coming a lot sooner than we think, probably by 2035, in my opinion.
Well, I have to tell you, my choice is either full-time driver or Uber, because the rideshare people, we have a lot of rideshare here in Vancouver. It's scary when somebody drives a car once every 3 weeks. Let you close the show.
Yeah, very true. I mean, I have 4 different daily ride share options, including one that just rents Teslas by the day or by the hour. So I'm curious as to how they charge those, but more importantly, to Jeff's point, what kind of surface damage do you have when you got a new driver who drives once a month or once every 3 months, who has a license, but probably doesn't have a lot of experience? So that's why that self-driving in Montreal was so interesting to me. That's one of the harshest cities to drive in, probably in North America, just because of the way people drive.
World.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. But thanks very much for everybody.
In Europe, they have the emotion, but the skill. In Montreal, they're emotional and no skill.
Have yourself a great day. Thanks for all the input.
Thank you all very much. It's been fun.
Great day,
Thanks for joining us. It was a great show, and follow us anywhere you would like on your favorite podcast, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and of course on our YouTube, or subscribe to our own channel.
It just leaves you and me.
Yeah, one sec. I can do this now. It's a locked meeting. I just learned how to do this.
Cool.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Boy, Patrina's got